bourbon barrel Scotch ale, but it tasted more like a Disaronno.
No, Christ almighty. Woo!
But with a bit of malt, a bit of character
sure.
behind
Malty.
it. Anyway.
Okay, what are we here to talk about?
I think people who have said that we're woefully unprofessional have actually gone lightly on us in quite a lot of ways.
Sometimes we get feedback from people that listen to this podcast, and they think they're just hearing complaining calls to Asda.
Yeah.
But just it's broadcast over Spotify.
Yeah.
And then they have to double check, and then they realise that we're neither talking about football nor philosophy.
Yeah.
So we're alienate intellectual or part an everyman. We're not anything.
We alienate our two audiences rather than one, and that in itself is an achievement. How about
my mum has stopped listening to this. My mum stopped listening to this, and I insisted she didn't, but she did to spite me because that's basically how she lives her life, and. She stopped listening. It gets piped in. No, but the thing is, the irony is, it gets piped into our nursing home. So no one has a choice whether to listen. She just locks herself in the toilet, and then that red cord that dangles from the ceiling. She keeps pulling it over and over again, and then they found her last week just with her head in the toilet because she just can't listen.
Why don't you bring a sense of professionalism to this, and at 2 minutes and 27 seconds into our podcast, actually welcome people in?
Welcome to The Outsiders, a football and philosophy podcast for the discernible listener who enjoys a good kick around, but also at the same time to think about it.
That was actually really good. I'm
going to cut that. Let me tell you something. Like I said, we've betrayed both audiences. Like, if you're a thinker, you've already thought your way out of this, and you've realised you put the wrong podcast on. Can I recommend a few other podcasts? There's some great podcasts you listen to. There's some great philosophy ones. There's some great football ones, and there's a couple that are really good philosophy football ones as well. I'll pop the links in the in the Spotify thing. If you're a thinker, then go along to those ones. And if you just like football and you're just interested, getting that ball in the net, then there's some great football podcasts. They're brilliant ones, much better than what we've got to say. So I think good luck to you. But in the meantime, we're gonna tick along. We've got a couple of fantastic features. We've got the ism jism, which is a brand new feature which Simon came up with.
I didn't come up with the name. No, I didn't.
You just came up with the name, and I came up with the concept. And what I do is I come up with amazing concepts for kind of expanding the vernacular and vocabulary of the listeners, or should I say, mum.
Well, not even her anymore.
No, not even her. A carer, really. Yeah. But we and then what I do is I say, how about we really get to grips and have some real depth, some real in-depth kind of like discussion and conceptual understanding of this word. And Sai just sits there and kind of shouts words that just rhyme with cock and knob and stuff like that. And every now and then one slips through, for want of a better phrase. And the one that slipped through this time was the ism jism, in which I'm going to throw out a few isms at him, and he is going to say how that relates to a footballing interest of that is contemporary. Now, you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, what the hell am I going to listen to that for? But I'll tell you something for free. If you're listening to that and you're listening to the isms, then when you're down the pub or just in your front room, talking to your mates or just your family or your wife, and you're thinking about football that you're watching on the TV in the pub / TV in your living room, and you're drinking a lovely pint of the old golden cold from your local / from your fridge, you can say something that sounds mildly intelligent, and you might bamboozle the person that you share your life with and seem intelligent.
I don't know about you,
and that's what we're about, isn't it?
I don't know about you, Stu, but frequently when I've been in conversation with my mates, someone's piped up and has actually asked the question, what is fascism actually about?
Listen, I can't move with my friends before they turn around and go, yeah, Jamie Vardy's all very good and well, but what about absolutism? And then I think there's a gap in the market here.
Yeah.
Or, for instance, sure, Bergkamp was probably more technical than Henry, but what is solipsism?
Yeah.
And I go, well, listen, there's a gap in the market here, and we need to fill it.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So that's the first feature. The second feature, what's that?
Well, the second feature
that's the bit where you talk. That's the bit, when I just said that, that's the bit where you talk.
Well, yeah, I mean, the first, I was quite interested in that particularly, but also
Yeah.
I felt like actually we could go a little bit further. And there's this, there's an amazing meme that sort of did the rounds in about 2012.
2012, a full 9 years ago. Brilliant.
Yeah,
This is as current as you're getting. We're currently 9 years about it, and I know what you're thinking. And I'm thinking about how we reduce, or we're there's a certain amount of reductionism. Thank you. Related to football in this podcast, which is why we keep talking about Kevin Davies. But carry on. So we're 9 years. We're catching up with ourselves because actually we were kind of in the mid-90s not too long ago. So we were quickly catching up with ourselves. Go on. 9 years ago, what happened, mate?
basically there was a meme that came out that described lots of different.
I call it a meme. I don't know where people get this word meme from. It's a meme.
Probably Richard Dawkins, professor.
Oh, Dickie Dawkins.
Big Dickie.
He listens to this. He listens to this. And I tell you something, right?
I
was talking to Dickie Dawkins the other day, right? Right? No, don't like that. I was still talking to Dickie Dawkins the other day, and he turned around to me and he said, "Yeah, Stu, you are the thinking man's JJ Okocha. But how does dualism work in modern day life?" And I say, "Well, Dickie, listen to the podcast." And then he said, "Fine." And in front of me, right there on his iPhone, he subscribed.
He listens to this whilst he hurts himself
in the groin,
across the whole body.
Yeah.
Now listen, the meme was actually a way to describe different isms. So taking it further, but using the idea of two cows. And it was quite an interesting idea. So it was actually looking at capitalism. It was looking at socialism. It was looking at the differences between different corporations from different countries and that sort of thing. Yeah, the big ones. And it used two cows to describe it. So one of the things I thought would be quite interesting for us to do would be to use two footballers. And we can relate it to actually, because I've realised we talk about football in a vanishingly small percentage of our podcast, which is a mainly football podcast. Yeah,
terrifyingly small. We talk more about the state of our nether regions than we do about football.
You talk about the state. No, you talk about the state of our nether regions more than
it's
than
important.
Else.
But the point is, this is a footballing of sorts podcast, so it's important we get to that right. And we've got a third feature, which is questions from an idiot in the street. We asked an idiot in the street some questions about football, and we're going to clear it up for them. And
the thing is, the ratio between... You can't do that. Yeah, I can't stay in. Even in our level of lack of professionalism, your flatulence is just being thrown into people's ears. And listen, the ratio between idiots in the street and Arsenal fans...
Yeah,
is 1-to-1, isn't it?
Massive.
It's 1-to-1.
What's the odds? When I think to myself, a general moron in the street and an Arsenal fan, 1-to-1.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay. So you want to look at? I can't even use the title of the first feature. No.
Thought spunk. Okay, I'm going to throw an ism at you. Okay. And I want you. This is actually almost like putting you on the spot a little bit.
It is putting me on the spot a little bit, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but you're a bright man. You're a bright man, and I tell you what, I learn from you every day. Mostly benign, like mundane things, like how not to make a cup of tea, or like how not to wipe my nose. But I'm gonna throw some things at you. I'm gonna throw what I think is a fairly easy one at you to begin with, and I'm going off the top of my head. But I'm gonna give you all of my isms.
Yep.
If that doesn't sound too dirty. Okay. So the first one I'm going to start with is collectivism. So, collectivism, for people that listen who might not know, or people that do, and like, calm down, stop being so arrogant, right? Is this kind of view that I guess there's an emphasis on the idea of the group as opposed to the individual.
Yeah. So
people working as a collective.
Yeah.
I think under the kind of remit or under the steam of like the greater good of the group is more important than that of the individual.
Yeah. So collectivism is a really interesting thing, I think, particularly when we look at football, because it sits in almost sort of an opposite area to some managers, but for some it's their whole philosophy, their whole footballing philosophy. So collectivism, if you want to look at the purest form of collectivism,
Yeah.
you need to look purely at Marcelo Bielsa. So Marcelo Bielsa is a collectivist in terms of his mentality. So
I've noticed of late that you've started calling him Marcello.
Yeah.
Now I don't know whether that's because you've been putting more paprika in your food, or what. I don't know what's gone on there. Have you suddenly gone to the dark side in terms of like language, or are you just trying to be faithful? Do you think that there's a chance that he might be fumbling around with his phone, kind of like smashing it with his... I imagine he's got enormous thumbs, smashing it with his enormous thumbs, and all of a sudden something pops up and he can hear you going, Marcello.
Listen. I'm building myself up for when society reopens again and I go to that first French restaurant and everybody else is hello, can I have the beef stew? I'm going to be sat there like a debonair prince and I'm like, bonjour, salut. Wait.
Boeuf bourguignon.
No, hors d'oeuvres.
No. No.
So,
Hors d'oeuvres.
Anyway, back to collectivism. Marcelo Bielsa.
What is it actually? Is it Marcello or Marcelo? Because I've been saying it either right or wrong for ages.
I've asked him directly.
Yeah. What did he say? Did he say Dave Bielsa?
He said, leave my house quickly because I've called the police.
Did he say it like that? Or did he say...
He said it in Spanish.
Leave the house immediately.
Yeah.
Or I'll call the police.
Yeah, that is incredibly insensitive.
I think you'll find if you add an O onto most English words, you'll get by in the major cities in Spain.
Said Sir Francis Drake.
So, Marcelo...
He's a collectivist in terms of... and case in point in that is you have a set of players who are doing relatively well in the Premiership who are almost through the Moneyball sort of style system, have very specific characteristics and have been trained and conditioned in such a way that they fit into the machine. So individual genius is not necessarily prized above an ability to contribute to the overall efficiency of the machine. What he has shown is a slight deviation from collectivism in this past season by the introduction of Rafinha, who I'm making the prediction will go to a club for between 50 and 80 million pounds in the next 2 seasons. He's got
not
individual...
a prediction if it's that broad, by the way.
Yeah, well, it's a prevision, as Eust would have said in one of our previous podcasts. But Rafinha, for example, like he has individual skill, but he still improves the whole collective by a certain percentage. Stuart Dallas... Yeah. Even Patrick Bamford, you look Alioski, you look at these players individually, they wouldn't get into Sheffield United. They wouldn't get into most sides, actually. But what Bielsa can see in them is that they are cogs in the machinery. Their percentage increases in the efficiency of the team. So in a collectivist sense, the individual is suppressed. And a case in point in that as well, philosophically, that's really interesting is one of the Leeds players, a mainstay of the side, a key player in their promotion, Pablo Hernandez, he threw his toys out the pram when he got substituted and very publicly did that thing that players do where they're not happy that they've been substituted. They have a bit of... We've seen nothing of him because, as far as Bielsa's concerned, what he's done there is he's removed his cog from the machine and he's tried to roll his own cog down the hill. But Bielsa's not there. Now, on the flip side of a collectivist sort of philosophy and worldview, I would actually put somebody like Jose Mourinho, particularly during his Chelsea years, because what Mourinho did is he almost saw and almost prized the sovereignty of the individual, and fed into that. So and interestingly, both Bielsa and Mourinho have 2 different skill sets. Bielsa has never managed a top club because a lot of people reckon were he to try to install his methods with £200,000 plus a week players who are being frequently told you're the best player in the world, you're in the top 5 best players in the world, it just wouldn't fly. What Mourinho does is he takes these players who have got such individual genius and he says, I'll create a platform for you to express what you need to do. So Didier Drogba, for me, is a really good example of that. Drogba did what Drogba did. And Drogba was told, you just crack on and you do it. You look at Mourinho at Manchester United, and actually he did exactly the same thing, which is really interesting because Manchester United have historically they lean more towards the collectivist approach with space for the individual brilliance and genius, but actually angled more towards a collectivistic outlook. So Mourinho going there was always a really strange option, whereas Chelsea basically were a nothing club until a lot of dirty Russian money came into them. At which point, when they became part of the state arm of Russia, what they were able to suddenly do was purchase players, and pretty much every single youth player in Europe who had an individual skill. And they got a manager in Mourinho, who was their most successful manager, who nurtured that skill, but didn't necessarily pursue a collectivist way of seeing things. So that meant it meant that some players actually never really shone, but other players shone really, really, really brightly. And Rodrigo, who plays for Spain as their number 9, is playing a bit part this season, partly because of injuries, in Leeds in a number 10 or a central midfield role. Because Bielsa's decided, the collectivist in him has decided, this is the best way to improve the team as a whole. Whereas I reckon someone like Mourinho, if he'd have got a Rodrigo, Bamford would have been straight on the bench and Rodrigo would have been straight up front, and Mourinho would have been telling him, you're the man, you do what you do, all of that side of things. So collectivism's a really interesting one to look at because I think it shows the differences in philosophies. Guardiola was another interesting one, who I actually think straddles the two, in that he's able to instill in some of the top players in the world a collectivist ideology. And so there was a period of time where he was in Barcelona and he had Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, Messi, and he was able to get out of them a collectivist way of working that still enabled them to demonstrate their individualism. But try to put that onto someone like Cristiano Ronaldo. Try to instill that into someone like Zlatan Ibrahimovic or Benzema or Sergio Ramos. It's not going to happen. So you need a different manager who's not collectivist for them.
So the opposite of collectivism is individualism.
Yeah, and you could look at it as individual sovereignty.
Do you think that how does the average football fan think? Do they think as a collectivist or an individualist?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's a collectivistic approach. Because so one of the whole ideas is that we've been talking about how football has replaced Christianity as the religion of our country. And I think it's a bit of a tired trope, but it's true in a lot of ways. But if you look at collectivist organisations like the church, which says certain things like, well, if you're going to be a part of us, you have to believe these things.
Yeah.
Particularly if you look at other religions around the world. I mean, particularly religions that are didactic. So if you look at Islam, for example, in a lot of ways,
the big monotheism.
Yeah, absolutely. There's if you want to call yourself part of the chosen, you have to subscribe to this way of thinking, this way of giving, this way of living your life. Now, I actually think that football clubs have engendered in their fans, even if they don't do it in their team, a collectivism, because it's you have to buy our clothes, you have to buy our training kits, you have to buy our tickets. When we disagree
with something, you have to reinforce our disagreement of it.
Yeah, you have to buy our Sky TV packages because they help pay us as clubs. What's really interesting is collectivism is demonstrated really clearly in terms of for fans in the Grealish debate. Because you ask an Aston Villa fan about Grealish, and
they might be utterly repulsed by him on one level.
They will never say that publicly to a Birmingham City fan. Whereas if you ask any other Premiership team about Jack Grealish, they'll call him a diving waste of space until
he gets linked with
until he turns up for England, at which point we suddenly join this new collective and talk about how Grealish is the jewel in the crown.
So that's like groupthink, isn't it?
I did the same thing, mate, because when we were watching England, Grealish went down a couple of times, and I remember saying to you, I was like, "What a genius!"
Well, you've always been quite vocal about this idea that, I mean, unfair play to you because I can't quite get there. Like, Grealish wins free kicks and penalties on the basis that he's really skillful and he plays for them.
Yeah,
and that's a real tightrope because there's a thin line between looking to get fouled and then being fouled because you're really skillful. I would say, for instance, I was watching a highlight reel the other day of like Ronaldo, like the old-fashioned Ronaldo, not the new Ronaldo. How he was just, when he played for Milan, he was just hacked at repeatedly. Yeah. And the highlight reel was not him scoring goals. The highlight reel was him walking around 6 people who all took it upon themselves to kick a lump out of him, and he refused to go down.
Yeah.
So that kind of breeds a different kind of thought behind it. But like you say, if you are skillful and the ball does stick to your feet, there is a good chance that at certain points people are just going to try and take you out of the game, and therefore by definition you're going to have to win more penalties and more free kicks because that's a part of your game. And you could argue that Manchester United get more and Leicester City get more free kicks and more penalties on the basis that they've got better players in the box.
But it depends on the context and who you're asking, because you're right, football clubs are collectivist organisations like religions are. And so what happens is, I can't stand Rashford when he's playing for Man United. When he's trying to shove food down children's mouths and also then playing for England, I love him. I think he's a genius. Yeah. I think he should be knighted.
When he's shoving food down children's mouths, I don't know where to begin on a kind of like English language level of that. But you mean when he's trying to sway the government's tax money in a certain direction? Yeah. Let's not get into it. Actually, we'll come on to that in a minute. Remember Rashford, we'll come on to that in a minute.
All right.
I just had an idea.
Oh, great. Good.
Okay, good. Listen, while I've had the idea, can we move on? I've got another ism just popped into my head, and you're going to love this one.
Oh, God.
Objectivism. So the idea that there's a kind of ethical underpinning of the fact that acts are objectively either right or wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's come back to shoving food down kids' throats.
Yeah. Well, so the idea that objectivism basically says that individual rights are basically the only thing that you can sort of hold on to. Is that what you're sort of?
What I'm getting at here is that there is universal truth behind. So being objective is that you remove the subjectivity behind a situation, and objectively an act is either right or wrong. So just to keep it contemporary in the country right now, someone refusing to get a jab that's kind of like to immunise themselves from COVID.
Yeah,
I think that there is a general consensus that is objectively a wrong decision because it kind of impinges upon other people's lives.
Okay, so
even though you might have some outliers that say, well, actually that individual kind of has the right to say whatever, actually objectively we have all made a national decision and maybe even a European and global decision that's a wrong thing.
Yeah. Okay, so
football.
Yeah. So but let's like tighten the lens a little bit more. Okay. So
I'll tighten your lens. Carry on.
So the 4 pillars of objectivism. Yeah. So reality, reason, self-interest, and capitalism.
Right. Okay.
So the idea of objectivism. So you're right in terms of that jab being objectively not a good thing. Like by saying rejecting having the jab, objectively we can say that's not a good thing. It's because actually there's a level there where it doesn't help the self-interest, but it also doesn't help my self-interest because you're making society remain closed for longer. It doesn't feed into capitalism. The fewer people who have jabs, the harder our economy is hit over time. Reason, it doesn't hit at all because all the evidence and all the science says they're not injecting 5G into your system and they're not going to put microchips in you to control you absolute nutcase. And then in terms of the reality of the situation as well, it's that actually we've had close to 150,000 people die because of this thing. So here's the thing that stops you from getting it and passing it on to other people potentially. So actually across the 4 pillars of objectivism, you actually stumbled across blindly a really good example of how objectively not having the jab makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Okay, let me throw a football scenario at you and you can put it through the ringer. Okay? So I'm going to say, objectively, that it is... let me put something out there. Objectively, Harry Kane is in the wrong for distinct moments in his playing time on the pitch when he purposely fouls and potentially injures players, and it goes under the radar. Okay.
So you're saying that's objectively wrong?
I think that's objectively wrong. I don't think there's a right side to that. I think that is true and wrong.
Well, objectivists actually I would actually say that somebody who is like slavish about objectivism will probably disagree with you there. Okay. Because what you're already going on to is this idea of collective rights rather than individual rights.
Okay.
And so Harry Kane has every right to do exactly what he wants. And what we're saying there is by fouling these other people and by sort of subverting the rules, by doing it under the radar, what he's doing is he's making the opposition team less efficient. And also what we're also singling into is it's not fair. And it doesn't feel fair and it doesn't feel right. Well, an objectivist would be like, that sounds a little bit like the idea of group rights. It sounds a little bit like the idea of rights beyond the individual. And so what I would say is, in terms of self-interest, for Harry Kane, objectively, it's absolutely fine. Because in terms of his self-interest, what he's doing is he's either winding up, injuring, or stopping an opposition player from preventing him from being the best striker in the world.
Okay.
In terms of capitalism, then a really interesting one here is like one of the hearts of capitalism is this idea of it being a meritocracy. So, you know, the whole thing of like, you know, let's make America great again. It's like, but the idea of that old America that they had was that, you know, a guy who grows up in a family with nothing can become the president of the United States and have everything. And so it's that idea of if you're clever enough, if you've got the merit, you know, you can get through. So in terms of from a capitalist point of view, again, objectively, there's nothing wrong from Harry Kane's perspective in terms of him doing that, because again, it strengthens his case of trying to be the best striker in the world. In terms of the reason behind it, I actually think the reason and reality are both linked here, because you're saying that he's flying under the radar. Well, until the rules change and until referees get better, he's still operating within the application of the rules that are in place. So unless they strengthen the sort of the citing that takes place after games, or increase VAR to the point where, you know, we're stopping the game all the way through, he's well within his rights in a lot of ways, although rights is a dirty word for objectivists. He's well within his rights to carry on doing what he's doing. So I actually think an objectivist would look at what Harry Kane's doing with that, you know, that backing into people when they go going up for a header and say...
But also challenging late when the ball moves away from the play.
Objectively, there's nothing wrong with that, because in terms of if our target is on Harry Kane, what's really interesting about objectivism then is the player that's just been fouled, objectively, the actions that Harry Kane has inflicted upon them then feel wrong and then look wrong and potentially could be. But then the argument is, what does that player do to prevent that from happening again or happening in the first place? Go back to capitalism, meritocracy. If you're a better defender, a stronger defender, if you're a little bit more canny, if you're more intelligent as a footballer than Harry Kane, then you're not going to allow him to do those things. And actually there's been occasions, what we've also seen, where there's been some pretty decent defenders who have realised what he's going to do, avoided it, and actually ended up making him look like a fool. And again, objectively, absolutely fine.
Yeah, okay. How about let's go back to Marcus Rashford, and objectively, it is a good thing that he has helped to feed poor children.
Yeah, objectively, it absolutely is, because if we've got poor children who can't feed themselves because of circumstances and situations, if you follow all the things that are happening over time in our country, the chances of them remaining poor are very high unless there's an intervention at some point. So in terms of if we want those to go on and become the scientists, become the CEOs, to become all the things that we want, top level contributors to society to be, then actually it may well start with making sure that they've got enough food to be able to attend school and actually understand what's going on and grow in a healthy way. So it actually serves capitalism. Self-interest, it's a really interesting thing, because there's a separate debate about.
It depends whether you're. It's another ism. It depends whether you're kind of a slave to skepticism or pessimism.
Yeah, exactly.
About how you view him. Yeah.
And another one, and an ism on that's based on those two things is true altruism. Can you ever be truly altruistic? Can you ever do anything that's good?
You can't shake a bloody stick at the amount of isms on this. Go on.
But that's an interesting one, because actually anyone can argue that even if it is subconscious, there's a level of self-interest that's come. And it's been really interesting. There's been some really. Do you notice how like the Conservative MPs all came out and they had like their little script to say about Marcus Rashford? It's like, why doesn't he just stick to football? And it was like, oh, just come on. But one of the things that happened quite interestingly towards the sort of the back end, before they actually caved in and decided it is probably right to feed children in a first world country, was actually they were trying to claim in some ways that there was some level of self-promotion.
Yeah.
Objectively, what Marcus Rashford is doing does actually raise his profile, does actually raise this whole question of can you be truly altruistic? Doesn't matter. There's a level of self-interest that has been sorted there. I think what he's done is demonstrably a good thing. But actually, that self-interest part comes in as well. And in terms of the reason and the reality of the situation, well, like the kids need to be fed, and even if you go down to a basic biological level as well, which is like we're just trying to keep our species alive, which we're not at that stage, but you could argue that too. I think what he's done there is actually it may objectively is a good thing. I agree with you.
Good. Now the third and final one is one that's very close to my heart. For several reasons, and it's something I've studied in quite a lot of detail, and it's just something that's pricked at the back of my imagination right now, because it's something I think probably gets spoken about quite a lot, but again, kind of under the radar.
Yeah.
When I was younger, and I used to speak to my dad about great footballers from the past.
Yeah.
The debate we would always finish on. He would say George Best, Pele, Jimmy Greaves, etc., etc. And at the time when I was talking to him, I was probably in the Cantona era.
Yeah.
And I would say quite openly, I don't think they'd be as good now as they were then.
Yeah.
So the final ism is historicism. And it's the idea that to understand historical events, you need to understand them within their own context as opposed to out of their context.
Yeah. That's a really interesting one, isn't it? So like if you picked up Billy Bremner, George Best. If you took Pele and whacked him in the Premiership now with all the nutrition and the training and all of that, that for me, I've got absolutely no idea about. And actually, that feeds into a few other it feeds into absurdism. It feeds into nihilism as well, because absurdism is like would then say, well, it's ludicrous. It makes no sense to do that because there's no sense in anything. It's ludicrous what we're doing, and there's no chance of us finding any meaning in anything. Whereas nihilism, it's like, well, there is no meaning in anything, so there's no point us talking about this. But then when you apply them to the historic outlook of like, would Pele have still scored 1,000 goals, which apparently he said he scored in his career, would he have scored 1,000 goals in today's game? I think is an impossible question to answer, because
it is. I think there are a few things that we can say that are objectively true, though. I think that the general quality of football 50 years ago, 60 years ago, was not as high generally as it is now.
But again, absolutely agreed.
I've got no data.
But the quality of the pitch, the quality of the equipment, the quality of the training, the understanding about nutrition.
So is it comparing apples and pears then?
I think it absolutely is. I really love the idea of trying to imagine what it would be like to have like the top players. So like anyone that's listening to this,
I just said that thing a second ago. It's interesting. I just said that thing a second ago about Cantona because we're another 20 years on from that, aren't we?
Well,
and so Cantona with Messi, Cantona's with some of the big names now. I mean, and maybe I can understand my dad a little bit more because I actually think Cantona would be fine now.
Yeah.
But I don't have any evidence to prove that other than I'm just turned into my dad.
No. well, the thing is as well that's quite interesting is a lot of the players that we think would be fine now are players that were almost 20 years ahead of their time anyway.
Yeah.
So Cantona had a particular skill set which we would see
which suited that historical context.
Yeah, in a lot of ways that like he stood out because he played in a certain way that nobody else was playing in. George Best.
What's kind of tragic about it is that I think that kind of like a really run-of-the-mill player right now would run Cantona into the ground and would meet the metrics of what that thing that's strapped to their chest like much more than him.
Catamol versus Cantona.
Yeah. And I think, and you know what's interesting is that I think I don't think Eric Cantona would have a chance now. That's the difference. Is that he won't get picked. You know, it's the Gaza paradigm, isn't it? Like Gaza wouldn't be selling the fish and chips outside the ground at the minute. He's not fit for that. I mean, the idea. You know, I remember watching Gaza when he played for Spurs, and I remember thinking I can be a footballer, and I hadn't really kicked a football up to that point. But I remember thinking because. There's his stomach hanging over his shorts. There, look, like he looks a bit like my dad. I turned to my dad on the couch and saw his stomach hanging over his jeans, and like his hair wasn't particularly styled, and you know, just was a bit out of shape, but kind of like a well-formed man of sorts. And I thought, oh, I could be a footballer like that. Gaza wouldn't be selling kits in the shop.
No.
He wouldn't, would he?
Well, no, he wouldn't be able to hold down a job.
Wouldn't go near him.
But the other thing as well that I think would be quite interesting would be to actually do a sort of a level of reverse historicism. So take players from the more modern era and put them into a historical context and see how they would do. So I'll take 3 of the best players in the world. So take Messi and have him play for Barcelona back in the 70s. Take Cristiano Ronaldo, have him play for Manchester United in the 60s. Take Kevin Davis and have him play for that great 66 England side up front. I mean, it would still be a foregone conclusion as to how it would end. But the actual serious point behind that is like take those players and put them in. But again, really interestingly, I immediately hit that blockage where it's like, but remove the nutrition, remove the training, remove the £190
Do you think that's why
boots.
people rate? Do you reckon that's why people rate Messi over Ronaldo at times? Because even though Messi is like super fit and the rest of it, it doesn't seem to be his trademark. It doesn't seem to be the thing that separates him from the rest. He still has the body shape of the little boy that's kicking the ball against the wall.
Well,
whereas Ronaldo is a product of super science.
It's the difference between nature and art. And so for me, I think there are 2 things there. Like it's like, okay,
hang on a minute, wait there. Aestheticism.
Ooh, another ism. So basically, like
there's too many isms today. Too many. We've overshot it. There's too many.
You've been on the glue, mate. What I tell you what's happened. Like so, if you've got the nature of genius, which we can say that Messi has, I think there is something that we all think about, and again, there's no data to prove it, but you could plonk them anywhere and they would do relatively well. Whereas the idea
you know what, my favourite player of all time is
JJ.
Not JJ.
Ivan Campo.
He's a very close third.
You see Askelainen?
I've got two, I've got no Ivan Campo. No, I've got two players in my head are just incredible. And you know what's interesting about both of them? Neither of them are athletic. Neither of them are kind of like machines. They're both utterly mercurial. Ruddock. My second favourite player of all time
Colin
is
Hendry.
Yeboah.
Oh
no. Yeah, Colin Hendry is what I base myself on. Yeboah, just that pure eclectic mania of just his muscles and his bones, his brain always work. But my favourite player of all time by a long distance is Zidane.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he, for me, that trumps. That's why I prefer Messi to Ronaldo. That's why I have Messi over Ronaldo.
He answers your question in a lot of ways. In that, when he was, when he began managing at Real Madrid, one of the Real Madrid players came out to say that they'd have their five-a-side game, as all the players, after a training session, and he would be the best player on the pitch still. And I think there's an element of that. Whereas, Ronaldo sort of sits around this sort of the art. So Ronaldo has been able to develop the nutrition, the diet, the training, and it's things like if you took Albert Einstein and whacked him in the Large Hadron Collider, you would expect that he would have the level of genius to be able to use what we've got now. To just crack on and be absolutely incredible. You take Marie Curie, you would see that. So in a footballing sense, I think I'm with you in that I would feel more confident that were you to plonk Messi into whatever football will look like in 2050, where nobody's heading the ball, there are 4 quarters and VAR, there's no referee, there are no linesmen, there's just a screen and a buzzer that tells them to stop playing, all that sort of whatever it is. Were you to put Messi in that situation, I think he would probably fare better than Ronaldo. Were you to put Cantona in that situation, I think he would fare better than, I'm trying to think who around that time, probably Giggs maybe. Because Giggs is another one that, he had the genius. Ronaldo has genius, but they were tuned athletes, weren't they? Whereas, you look at Cantona now, and he's living life. But I love that idea of the genius being able to just not be based on any sort of historic context.
When you've played FIFA and you've played with those previous great players, and it doesn't quite work for you, and you think, And the thing is, they're all on 99. They're all like the best they can be.
Yeah.
But they're with their own individual skills. But for some reason, there's a kind of like almost like a mental block. Like they're not. It's almost like they're not good enough because you've accepted in your mind they're not as good as the players now, or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the same respect, do you think that some players now are slightly more transient within our memories? Like, will we be talking about Mbappe in 15 years?
Will we be talking about him in 30 years? I think is the big question. And because we're talking about Pele, we're talking about Yeboah, we're talking about Cantona, but we're not actually, in terms of a footballing sense, we're not talking about Bruce. We're not talking about players that, unless you're a fanatic about your club, people are going to remember. I'm pretty certain that non-Leeds fans don't rave every single day about Tony Dorigo.
No. And there's an argument to be had that in a historical and historicist way, there's some players that can't exist outside of their historical context. Like, as much as I love the guy, and I do love him, Roy Keane is a perfect example now. He won't make it as a footballer now. And it's not because he wasn't good. He just couldn't exist within the parameters of the game.
Yeah.
He would be so. I reckon he'd probably be in the bottom half of the championship, and he'd be, before you knew it, he'd be on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, just as the guy that got sent off every game.
Yeah.
That it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah.
And the game, you can argue, might have been a different kind of quality then, or more entertainment, but that's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
Okay, listen. We've spoken about isms. The ismgism has well and truly left the stable. I can't mix metaphor there.
The stable?
We're going to come on to the 2 footballers, 2 cows thing next week, I think, because there's legs in that. But I want to answer the question. I want to answer the questions from the moron on the street. So we accosted a moron on the street and said, what are the 3 things that you want to know?
He happened to be an Arsenal fan, didn't he?
He happened to be an Arsenal fan, and to be completely honest with you, I found him quite revolting. But, each their own, and I find lots of different people revolting, so fair play to him. So the first question is, I'll come to his first question last, because it's a bit more of a summation of something. First question, Bruno Fernandes. Does he show that acclimatisation is a myth, and the same goes for Odegaard? What do you say about this?
First of all, I'm surprised that he was able to use the word acclimatisation. I wish
I didn't. He said something else, but I interpreted it as acclimatisation.
So acclimatisation. What in terms of the need?
I think from league to league, or like style, playing style, or like on quality of squad to quality of squad.
I actually think it comes back to genius, but then genius can be squashed, and so it's really interesting. Messi has been allowed to be Messi because he's been coached by Enrique, by Guardiola, by managers that have allowed him to demonstrate his genius in a way that fits him. How many Messis have had their genius coached out of them, or have not been allowed to develop because of the coach who they've been under? How many Messis has Heckingbottom squashed? How many Messis has Hockaday squashed? How many Messis has Pardew kept on the bench?
Yeah.
And so that's a really interesting one where I think acclimatisation in terms of culture and country and things like that. I mean, come on, we can't take away from the fact that Di Maria did not enjoy living in Manchester. But if you've come from the places that Di Maria has lived in...
Manchester United.
Yeah, I mean, that was an element of it as well. But if you come from the places that Di Maria has lived in, unless you are so wedded to the idea that you're playing for Manchester United, you love the club, you're not going to fall in love with the jewel of the Cheshire Coast, are you? It's
well, Liverpool.
And that's actually where London clubs will always have the edge over non-London clubs, because as nice as Leeds is, as up and coming as Birmingham is, you're not going to get top players wanting to live there unless they desperately want to play for your club. And so I think there's
how do you quantify then players that do go to the Newcastles, do go to the Leeds, do go to maybe even lesser known clubs such as a couple of Welsh clubs or wherever, and say that this is everything to me? Here.
Because I think there has to be a number of ingredients in place, and this is where Just, our statistical philosopher, would probably be quite interesting, because you'd have to look at their personality. What's their motivation? So I go back to Rafinha for Leeds. Mm-hmm. He's Brazilian. He's lived in the south of France.
He's Brazilian. He's lived in the south of France. His name's Rafinha. Hey.
And now he lives in Leeds. And it's... I love Leeds. But Leeds is not the south of France or Brazil.
No.
And
but you know what is, kind of? Barcelona.
But he wants to play for Leeds because of the club, because of Marcelo Bielsa, and also because because he was sold this, we really like you, we're going to value you, we're going to invest in you, all of that sort of thing. So that's why Newcastle can get players. That's why Sunderland inexplicably and Middlesbrough inexplicably can get players to come to those arid wastelands. To play for them. And it's like, but also what they've got is these are historic clubs. These are historic clubs with passionate fan bases. That's got to also be another thing as well, that particularly when we start going back into stadiums is going to come in. But always London will have the edge. How many players have we seen London clubs take over a Midlands or a Northern club because the player wanted to live in London?
Yeah. So that question was, does Bruno Fernandes show that acclimatisation is a myth, and does Odegaard also show that?
I think it's a stupid question. No, I'm being harsh. I'm being harsh. It's a question that I think misses the point in some ways. That actually there are so many factors into why a player does acclimatise to a team at a certain time in a certain place.
Too many. It's like any bad scientific experiment. Too many variables, not enough control.
Yep.
Okay. Number 2 is particularly solipsistic. Or solipsism is another thing that I'll come to next week. Incidentally, if you're interested in the ism-jism, next week's ism-jism will consist of mysticism, utilitarianism, and solipsism. Number 2, is Arteta doing a good job? Now, this is interesting because what I want to do with that sounds like, to be honest, this sounds like a primary school child asking questions. And so fair play to him. You know, he's coughed this out. Fair play to him. He's kept it about Arsenal. But I think what's interesting here is the word good. Is Arteta doing a good job? And I guess that depends on who you ask and who you are. I think he's doing a good job, but I don't support Arsenal.
Yeah, but your definition of a good job is Arsenal not doing well. So agent Arteta is doing brilliantly.
He's doing a fantastic job.
I think that I think there are variables at play here. So,
do you think Arsenal will be top 4 next season?
No, and so I think he's not doing a good job. He's not doing a good job because if you look at I think these days the Premier League is capitalism on speed. The Premier League is, at its core, a meritocracy in terms of if you are better at business, if you have more money, and if you are able to get the footballers who are better, who command the higher wages, you generally, on the whole, will do better. Manchester City, case in point, look at this season. Arsenal have the infrastructure, they have the history, they have the location, they actually have the youth system, they have the stadium. They've actually got a large fan base who are passionate. You know, just watch Arsenal Fan TV for kicks. They've got all of those ingredients in place that almost every other single club, apart from the top 6 and maybe top 8 in the Premiership and maybe a smattering in the Championship, but everybody else in the football pyramid would kill for. So the fact that they are where they are is not good enough unless Arteta can convert what this is, if this is seen as a rebuilding season.
Yeah, well, this is it. I think that question is, let's talk again in 18 months' time because we could all be eating our words.
Yeah, but welcome to 2021 because you can have welcome. There's been a lot of changes, but there's this 2001. You could be given.
God almighty, we're going backwards.
You could be given. I don't know what that was. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat. You could be given 3 seasons.
You're talking about Arteta.
You could be given 3 seasons to do the rebuilding process, but in 2021 now, your rebuild has got to take place over the summer, mate.
Okay. So the question was Arteta is Arteta doing a good job? And your answer is no. Okay, there we go. Unilateral. What we don't need to do is talk too much. I don't think people listen to us talk. So, question 1: does Bruno Fernandes show acclimatization of the myth? No. Number 2: is Arteta doing a good job? No. Number 3: this is a good question, and it's simple as this. And to be honest with you, I mean, this was the height of his intelligence when I asked him this, and he simply said, "Who's going to be top 8?" So what we're going to do is I'm just going to talk through the top 8 a little bit, and we'll talk about who they're playing next. And I'm interested in what you're thinking about that. So my personal feeling is, Manchester City are walking away with it.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
I think I can't look past Manchester United for second because I just think that they got ahead of steam. I feel Leicester City are going to fall away a little bit, not too much, but I think they'll be 4th or 5th. I think Chelsea will finish 3rd. And wait. I think 4th or 5th. I think 4th or 5th.
We're diving around it. So, are we agreed that 1, 2, 3 is Manchester City, Man United, and Leicester? I think Leicester will leapfrog Man United.
No, I think you're banging. I think you're banging. Well, the matches after the international break are interesting because Man City have got Leicester City, Manchester United have got Brighton, and Chelsea have got West Brom. So you can see West Brom falling over in front of Chelsea. Yeah. You can see Manchester United spanking Brighton, despite the fact they've been okay for a couple of matches. And if you're being honest, you can see, generously, you can say a draw for Leicester City against Man City, or possibly just Man City winning.
I think Thomas Tuchel has shown how good a job he's done after Fat Frank did his best to condemn Chelsea to 9th or 10th in the league. To get them to 4th, with an outside chance of 3rd, if not 2nd, shows how well he's done.
They're 5 points behind 3rd.
5 points for me is quite big gap at this stage of the season, and Leicester
with 27 points to play for.
I think we're doing Leicester a disservice, and we've spoken about this in terms of big clubs and small clubs. We've got an inherent confidence that Man United are going to do well because they're a big club. I think Leicester have earned the right to actually not be like, oh, they'll drop away. I think Leicester will be up there. I think 1, 2, 3, 4 will be made up of Man City are going to win, but Man United, Leicester, and Chelsea is up in the air. But I think those three are going to be there.
Then let's argue over fifth. You've got West Ham on 49 points. You've got Tottenham on 48. You've got Liverpool on 46, Everton on 46, and Arsenal on 42. And Arsenal are well and truly out.
Well, no, I don't think. I think Arsenal are too inconsistent at the moment under Arteta. And I feel sorry for Arteta because he's got nutcase players, but he keeps like David Luiz, like who is just ludicrous. He is.
I think it's worth saying as well. Everton have got a game in hand, so they win their game in hand, they go up to fifth.
I actually think Everton are a good shout for fifth.
What do you think about West Ham? Everyone sung their praises. Everyone said they're doing brilliant.
Oh, I think
they've had out of the last 4 matches, they've lost 2, drawn 1.
Something hilarious has happened. West Ham have become David Moyes' Everton. If he does the same next season, so I think West Ham, if they finish 8th, 7th, 6th, or 5th, have to be ludicrously happy with that because
they always got relegated.
If they do it again next season, they suddenly become. Nobody ever wanted to play David Moyes' Everton because they won more than they lost and they got draws against some of the top teams because they had something in them. West Ham are showing.
What do you make about Spurs? What do you make about Spurs? They've had a disastrous time of it.
You know what?
They won relatively comfortable last match, but they I don't like the way they play. I don't think anyone likes the way they play. They're grinding out results.
They're a hard club to like. They're a really hard club to like.
Which is interesting because in the past they've been worse, but I've liked them.
Yeah, and actually a lot of Leeds players went over to Tottenham, and for me, from my personal connection there, I liked that. But because I felt, go on, do well, because where we were on the way down, you wanted to see like Robbie Keane do well, and players who had done a good service for the club. But they're just like, I love Jose Mourinho, like I love him just for the drama. But as a manager, he annoys me. There are players that I admire in Tottenham, but outside of Son and Kane. We're seeing, unfortunately, the thing that I find hard as well is we're seeing the end of 2 really, really top defenders in Vertonghen and the other one. I want to say Verstappen, but it's not Verstappen at all. But here the 2 centre backs in Tottenham who often play like we're seeing the end of a really good careers, but they never quite were right at the top. And so, I don't know. I kind of hope they slip away. Liverpool again. I don't know. You never know what Liverpool's going to turn up in a game. So I think actually fifth is probably between. I actually think it's between West Ham and Everton.
Okay, that's interesting. So, how many points does a team have to have at this moment in the season for you to be out of the running for the top 8? Considering that Everton are currently sat in 8th with 46 points, what is too low an amount of points to have at this moment?
I actually think from Arsenal down. I think Aston Villa
42 down.
As much as I'm loath to say it, I think Aston Villa have a chance in terms of they've got a game in hand on 41
They've
points.
had an awful set of results.
I know, but if they win their game in hand, they're on 44. 44. They're 2 points.
Fulham's their game in hand.
Yeah, which is for a lot of teams 3 points. So I think Arsenal, Leeds, Crystal Palace, Wolves. I think top 8 is beyond them now.
Okay, that's interesting. And are you saying that Fulham are down?
Fulham. Well, Sheffield United are down and West Brom are down. I think that's agreed.
I still think that Newcastle are going down. I just can't see anything for them. Fulham. I'm no Scott Parker fan. I'm certainly not a Fulham fan. But when I look at the fact that the last 5 matches they've lost 3, drawn 1, and won 1, they should have easily had at least 5 or 6 more points than they have had.
I'd hate it
in the past 5 matches.
I'd hate it if Newcastle go down. I just feel for their. I'd feel for their fans because they've been a yo-yo. Yeah. They've been a yo-yo club for too many years. And maybe I'm going back to that romanticism. maybe I'm going back to that sort of
That's
romantic view of Newcastle being that historically large club and a fan base in an area that actually, again, it feels like Leeds in like the entire city seems to be based on the success of that club, and it's like I just want them to do well. Whereas Fulham, I can't be fussed, to be honest.
No, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So the bottom 5 teams, their next matches they have in the Premiership are this: Sheffield United, Leeds United, West Brom, Chelsea, Fulham, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Spurs, Brighton, Manchester United. You can't see any of them getting any points from those matches.
But the thing is, it's really interesting. Like, points become really strange for clubs that don't pick up points. So if you're a sort of a Burnley, Southampton, Wolves, sort of Crystal Palace, who are still looking over your shoulder a little bit.
Yeah.
As a fan of a different club to you guys, I just want to say I don't think you have to worry that much, because the idea of
it'll be really low
the difference, like 1 point, getting a draw.
I think 35 points will keep you up this year.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, actually. But just
35, 36.
Just that 1 point, like Fulham, to get 1 point, the monumental effort they have to show to get that point is major. Whereas those clubs above have got that capacity and capability to pick up 3 points here and there.
If you're 2 points ahead, and the team below you loses and you get a draw, that's a win. And it's not just a win that they have to get while you lose. Do you know what I mean? It's just about momentum and the rest of it. And if you're 3 points ahead and you get a 4th point, that almost seems impossible. It almost seems impossible.
Yeah, that for me is how Leeds have done so well. Actually, all the lazy punditry of saying, "Oh, they leave themselves so open," and it's such a all of that sort of thing. It's like, well, the thing is, the way they play means that there are occasional games that they lose dreadfully, but they pick up 3 points here and there, 3 points here and there, 3 points here and there, rather than the occasional draw and then the occasional win and then these losses. Those 3 points, those wins are absolutely vital, and that's what's put them into safety. Because Leeds fans still need to actually think about safety is the goal, not flirting with anything higher than that. It'd be great if they finished above Arsenal. It'd be hilarious. But at the same time, like, actually, that's why Crystal Palace actually haven't been dragged down into anything worse, because they've managed to scrape together 10 wins. But what's really interesting is, if you look at Sheffield United, West Brom, Fulham, they've got, between them, they've only got 12 wins between those 3 clubs. Well, if you go to Leeds and above, every club above them has got 12 or more wins just on their own, whereas the bottom 3 have only got the 12 wins. And then you look at Newcastle and Brighton, 7 wins each. And it's really interesting, because there should be different permutations, but it's not. In the Premiership, 3 points is what it's worth going for. And so don't play for the draw. Get smashed every few weeks. Fulham,
though, right? 11 draws. And there's definitely some of those that should have been wins.
Well, the fact is, it's proof that draws don't keep you up. And actually, obviously, they've got... If they'd have converted...
They actually draw every single match.
Mathematically, what's quite interesting is if you trade some of those draws and add them to the losses column, but move some of those draws over to the win column, Fulham actually suddenly in a stronger position.
Safe, yeah.
So
it's interesting. Yeah. Okay, so you're thinking Everton, West Ham at the top. Who do you think is going to get 7th and 8th?
It's going to be Liverpool and Aston Villa.
You think Liverpool are going to be relatively strong moving forward? Do you think they're going to finish the season respectably?
I think they'll finish the season respectably. But if we're talking about them finishing 7th or 8th, then that's going to be because they'll lose a few and win a few.
And who's going to be the next manager to be sacked?
The next manager for me to be sacked.
It's interesting, actually, because a load of clubs, like you would suspected that Steve Bruce would be gone by now. I would have suspected that Arteta would be gone by now. I would have suspected that either Palace or Wolves would have.
Can we not talk? We won't talk about the bottom 3. In terms of the sacks, I think the next manager to be sacked will be Potter.
And on that bombshell. On that bombshell, we're going to say thank you for listening to The Outsiders, our football and philosophy podcast. We've gone through the ism jisms today. You can thank me.
Do we need to do an advert?
Listen, if you want. Oh God Almighty, an advert. Okay,
because we've actually got sponsors who we've actually almost deliberately ignored over the last few podcasts.
You know what? Do you want to know why I've ignored it?
Why?
It's not out of malice. It's out of the fact that my testicles are in fine fettle. And I was actually going to ask you in the first minutes of this podcast how your testicles are doing, because I know you have problems with them, don't you?
Why don't you advertise our sponsors?
Why don't you start and I'll join in?
So we've been sponsored very generously by a wonderful company called Manscaped, who offer a wide range of male grooming products. Now, what's really interesting about them is they provide products for the conservative male as well as the metrosexual male. And I think we embody, between the two of us, that broad spectrum.
Yeah.
I, for one, am a big fan of the Manscaped leather carry case. That's a toiletry bag that is of high quality and quite a lovely addition to my travel set. Whereas for you've gone the whole hog, and they've got a range of sort of electric items, haven't they? That remove
I know that
the more follically abundant difficulties that some males have down below.
Now, I know, no difficulties implied. No difficulties implied. What I would say is, I am a man that respects a shorn scrotum as much as the next one, and I like. I've moved on to the odors. I've moved on to the fantastic kind of like array of different kind of moisturizers and scents that come with it. So Manscaped have sent us these fantastic things would you remember what it's called? Because I remember you thought it was a bit dodgy. You thought you were going to send it back because it had a funny old name, didn't you?
What, the starter kit? How long do we have to talk about them anyway? I think we're doing like a bit of a they're sponsoring us, but not that much.
The lawnmower 3000. No, sorry, the lawnmower 3.0. No, you're not into that. But I tell you what, I absolutely love it, and I absolutely love the boxers, and I absolutely love the aftershave. We're
check them out, the podcast. Stuart. Where can they find them? Where can they find them? And can they get a discount?
Yes. I tell you what, you are a gem. You go to www.manscaped.com and you pop in where it says ask for a code Outsiders, and you get a lovely 20% off.
Ooh,
which is no small amount, is it?
And
especially for you.
What's brilliant with that is, it somehow enables us to keep on splurging and vomiting words in random orders into a microphone.
Yeah.
So if you want to be complicit in that, whilst looking after yourself.
Well, complicit is the word. And I tell you something. I spent a lot of time with young Si on this podcast, and I have never known him have such a moisturised ball bag. And I tell you what, it's an absolute delight. It is an absolute delight, and I love them for it. So get onto manscaped.com and
there's a range of items. There's a range.
If you're a prude, you can have the carry bag. If you're not, you can set yourself free. Manscaped.com, Outsiders in the code box, get yourself 20% off on ball bags. Big Si. We're going to call it a day there. Thank you very much for listening. Take care. And you know what, Si? Take care, mate. Because, nothing merely means anything, does it?
So you asking me to take care is absolutely hilarious because...
Pointless. In fact, I think that there's a bus with your name on it.
Well, actually at the same time, I just hope your slow decline into entropic cascade failure and eventual stardom. But I don't care because...
No. All the best, mate. Take care of yourself. I love you.